Blair here. Great to have you joining me this morning again for our 10 minutes of morning calm. And today I want to sort of riff a little bit off of a reading here as well. Something we covered on Sunday, which has been sort of knocking around in my head. Now, the sermons at New Church Live are done sort of in the rounds. We have a sermon writing team and lots of people get involved in a lot of stuff. And then the service itself takes on a life of its own. So there are points in services where it's like, wow, personally, I hadn't thought of that before. And then it continues to grow throughout the next couple of days. And that's what happened with one concept that came out of the sermon writing team that I found really fascinating. One of them had said, yeah, we need to make sure we talk about the good parts of darkness. We tend to very much divide the world into what my friend Ned Huber calls polarities. There's light and there's dark, light and dark, light and dark, light and dark. And there clearly are light and dark, but it's never always that simple, right? And there actually are some really, really life-giving parts to darkness. And in some weird way, sometimes I think we can have even more clarity in times of darkness than in times of light. Like, go figure that, right? And here I'm thinking about I'm thinking about things like when a loved one passes. Clearly a time of darkness, but boy, does that concentrate people on how much we mean to each other, how much families, friends, connections, the impact we make on the world. All those things get super clear in that time of darkness in a way that in the middle of a sunny spring day, probably not as much. So that's what I want to read. I want to read a little passage here. And what's fascinating again about this passage is in the lectionary, in other words, in the readings that go up to Easter, is that first off, that the authors would put this reading in there at this point in time. And it's really fascinating to think, well, why is that? And it's a story about Lazarus. Many of you are aware of that story. Lazarus is raised from the dead. One of the last miracles before Easter. Not a big surprise, right? You can sort of see the foreshadowing there. And that's where we pick it up here. Jesus says calmly, are there not 12 hours in a day when a person can walk without stumbling, when he sees the world bathed in light? And then he quickly adds, our friend Lazarus is sleeping. I'm going to wake him. When he sees the world bathed in light. So it's fascinating, right? Like, here's Jesus saying, yeah, there are these 12 hours of light that we get to enjoy, and the world's just bathed in light. We just see it everywhere. And then he switches over to Lazarus dying, and he's saying, look, Lazarus is sleeping. We're going to go wake him. And that's fascinating too. And there's a number of parts to it that really are really interesting to me. One is this idea of 12 hours of light. Now, the obvious connotation there is that there were 24 hours in a day then, 24 hours in a day now. So he clearly is splitting it right down the middle. It's right down the middle. And it's hard to imagine that at that particular time, as he was preaching, there were 12 hours a day, 12 hours a night. He's obviously using a metaphor there. And the idea that life is always that great mixture of light and dark. It's always got both. And it's not even that sometimes we live completely in one and then shift completely into another. And a lot of the time, actually, it's this admixture. And in days of and times when it is very light outside, when the world is bathed in light, again, that negative space, as they would talk about from a painting term, helps to give contrast, helps us to see. Again, just shining a bright spotlight in someone's eyes is not a great way to be able to see. And as well as in times of darkness, there's also like a light there that's really fascinating. And that's what I want to focus on now is what is that deep light in the darkness? What is that? What was the phrase I wrote down here? That loving solidarity that we can create in those times. So what I'd ask you to think about here, folks, is think about a campfire. And hopefully all of you have done a campfire. If you haven't, you need to do one, just so you know. You do a campfire. We used to do a lot of them when I was little, when I was younger. I was big on camping. And there's just something about sitting around a campfire with friends and family. And just hearing the fire, there's something very mesmerizing about a fire, and all looking at each other and all seeing each other. And there's a certain clarity to that, right? There's a certain, in that light embedded in the darkness, there is a definitive, palpable clarity. And amazing what people share. And I don't remember, again, like I'm not here remembering big conversations per se. What I'm remembering is that feeling in my younger years of just like, oh, here we are together, you know, and just looking at people. And sometimes people would sing. That was not the Blair family. There were some other families sometimes we did campfire stuff with who did. And it was incredibly powerful. Now, this is the one I want you to really think about, really think deeply about. Do you realize this? Do you know, think of a campfire, right? And do you realize that there's someone who is on the edge of your campfire, who's leaned way back from it, who's 2 steps behind, who's still out there in the darkness? And one of their greatest desires is actually to be invited into your circle, is to be invited in to be with you and to be invited in to connect with you in some way, shape, or form. And picture that, folks. I think we've all had that experience. I would imagine, like, imagine you're walking along and all of a sudden you see a group of friends and they're having a campfire and you're just thinking, boy, I would love to be part of that. Well, I'm just going to put out there, I am sure there are people who want to be part of that group with you. Sure of it. And that's sort of where we can start to lean in. I think times like this, and I was writing about it in our blog this morning for New Church Live, is times like this we can get so like upside down, and we can consistently choose in times of darkness to think, well, it's all about my own comfort. I'm just going to retreat into my own little world and my own little comfort. And that's just not it. That's just not it. I think God, especially in times of darkness, is asking us to lean in new ways. And one of those new ways might just be asking the question, who's on the edge of your campfire, so to speak? Who's somebody who you can invite in? And as well, like, where's their place where you want to be invited in? And certainly, if New Church Live or myself, if we can be part of that, please raise your hand. Please tell us. Please let us know. And we'll invite you into some stuff that you may enjoy. That's the world, folks, that I think where we can find a light in the darkness. And that shouldn't be glib. That should be a deeply profound call to action of sorts. Because I know there are people, and a lot of it may actually surprise you. There may be people out there who you think are very opposite you, but the reality is what they're really looking for is that loving solidarity. And they're looking for a place where they can experience that same intimacy and that connection, that light in the dark in times, right now that really stressful, that feel really challenging and certainly don't show much in the way, so don't show signs of abating in any time in the near future. So, friends, that's what I'd ask us all to think about today. Just think about that idea of rediscovering the clarity in darkness, and rediscovering that clarity not just as like an intellectual thing, but rediscovering other people, rediscovering a way to welcome more people in, more campfires, so to speak, more ways we can gather around light, even in times of incredible darkness, and find that loving solidarity. Like, that's a call, right? And that's a very meaningful call. There's nothing easy about that. If it's easy, you're probably not pushing yourself enough. There you go. That's my little 2 cents for the day. So, folks, that's my thought for today. I hope that settles in some way, shape, or form and gives you a little call to action for today. Who do you want to invite for a place around the fire? So with that, friends, what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little meditation. After we do the meditation, we're going to do a little prayer, then a little blessing, and then we're going to close with a hello on social media. So with that, friends, let's all get a little breath. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know that I Be still and know that. Be still and know. Be still and be still. Be. Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and bring you peace and bring you home. Amen. All right, dear friends. So let's get a little sneak peek here. And again, I hope you're all doing well. Just a reminder, tomorrow night we do have a Easter small group going on. It's part 2, but don't worry if you missed part 1. If you'd like to be part of it, of course, you can always shoot me a note and I will gladly send you along a little Zoom invite. It is a ton of fun, wonderful group of people led by our very own Shannon Carlson, who's often on this call from out in Austin, Texas. Her and I lead it together, and it's been a wonderful group. All right. Sherry writes, wow, light in the darkness, what a comfortable and beautiful concept. It really is, Sherry. And like you and Bill, I'm sure have had that right 100 times where you guys are out with your camper, right? You got a little campfire going, and I'm sure you've met brand new people around that campfire and just had this incredibly intimate experience. And it's kind of funny. For me, I always felt like, you have that great connection at night, and then you see somebody in the daylight the next day, just sort of loses that vibe in some ways. And maybe that's the power of connecting in times of night. Paige writes, good morning to you, Paige. Henry, you can shoot me a private message, buddy. Marcus, great to have you joining us this morning, and good morning to you. Linda writes, lights embedded on the darkness. What a beautiful phrase. And yeah, and that's that idea that we get light embedded on the darkness is really important. There always is light in the darkest times. I think sometimes the good memories are the light, especially in the dark times. Very true. Marcus, stars in the sky. Yeah, I totally agree with that, Marcus. And isn't it fascinating that it's much easier? This is strange, right? On a clear night, it's much easier to navigate than it is during the day. Go figure that. That's kind of interesting. The darker it gets, the more you see the stars. Absolutely. Linda writes, have a good day and remember to look for the light. Amen to that. Sherry writes, thank you. Linda gives a little shout out there to Terry. So glad you folks are all joining us. And I do wish you all the very best today. And may you find a little light in the darkness. And not only may you find it, but most importantly, dear friends, may you be it. Take care. Bye-bye.